international conference and thereby showing a clear interest in Canadian literature studies also from outside Canada. I have been involved in Canadian literature for more than 3 decades, and this research focus has contributed to a rewarding, sometimes adventurous scholarly life. In Germany, where I have been a professor since the 1980s, one cannot build a university career on Canadian literature only. With a mere 8% of the university personnel in Germany consisting of tenured professors, there is not a single professorship denominated as Canadian literature or Canadian studies. Nevertheless, Canadian literature has been doing well in Germany, both outside and inside academia. The institutional setup is one reason why in Germany we have never focused exclusively on Canadian literature, as has often been the case in Canada, and why German scholars tend to approach Canadian literature also from a comparative perspective. In my case, I'm officially a professor of American literature, but have always dealt with both Canadian and American literatures, with Canadian literature and comparative North American studies being my research focus. One challenge in Germany in the 20th century, or for the larger part of it, was that in general, Canadian studies were not highly regarded, at least could not compete with British and American studies in many ways. I can happily report that intensive and extensive endeavors by individual scholars in recent decades, partly also supported by Canadian subsidies, have done away with many barriers that such a hierarchical approach to different national literatures entail. Could it be that the new frontier that Canadianists from outside Canada still have to face is no longer general recognition of their scholarly works in their own countries, but from within Canada itself? Quite a few border guards, after all, are still out there, whereas this conference laudably transcends borders in several ways. When I read in the invitation that, quote, many Canadians do not know there is international scholarship on CanLit, even though much of it has been published in English and some of it with North American publishers, I felt reminded of the International Reviews, a book I co-edited with Robert Croach back in 1985 received, such as William Keith's review in Journal of Canadian Studies, quote, stimulating and original contributions, gaining ground, European critics on Canadian literature, the book's title, signals a breakthrough in the acceptance of Canadian literary studies abroad, unquote. Perhaps we could say that this conference at McMaster University, organized by 2 Canadian scholars, and with most of the papers intentionally coming from non-Canadians, signals a breakthrough in the acceptance of Canadian literary studies from abroad. The paper I will be contributing to this conference deals with a comparative approach to Canadian and American narratives that are involved with crossing the border between Canada and the United States. Although I will focus on Canadian border narratives for this occasion, I believe that all Canadianists understand Canada even better if we further open the scholarly border demarcating Canada. In this way, the border-crossing narratives I will analyze in my contribution may be regarded as variously symbolic. In the intensifying liminal state created by the border-crossing experience, such as the catalyzing behavior of the often identity-challenging border guards, being in between 2 countries or states, inside and outside the border, the characters in their transitional state in these stories are made intensely aware of the demarcating and separating, yet at the same time also bridging and enabling function of borders. In this manner, the These contemporary border narratives and narratives of nation, which are a far cry from suggesting a collective space called North America, may be seen as representative of what Laura Moss, in a different context, has called an updated nationalism and an updated transnational nationalism. These narratives display an awareness of what very different material and mental spaces the Canada-US border delineates, yet often also at the same time transcend that border through the very act of a desired, yet also fear-inducing border crossing on a North American continent marked by intense travel and trade, both material and immaterial